All right, baby, pull up a chair and get comfortable. This ain't no easy story for me to tell, but it's one that's been burning a hole in my soul. And sometimes the only way to put a fire out is to speak it into the open air. My name is Auntie Mae, and this is the God's honest truth about my daughter-in-law, Monique, the one who looked me in my eye, called me a pest, and told me she wished I was dead. It all started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are usually for quiet blessings, for thanking the Lord you made it through Monday. I was in my kitchen, the heart of my home, putting the finishing touches on a lemon bundt cake. That was my son Jeremiah's favorite since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. The smell of zest and sugar was hanging in the air, and I was humming an old hymn my mama used to sing, something about leaning on the everlasting arms. I felt at peace. Foolish, I know now. Peace is just the quiet before the storm rolls in and turns your whole world upside down. See, Jeremiah, my only child, had married Monique 3 years back. In the beginning, she was sugar sweet, called me Mama Mae, laughed at my stories, asked for my recipes. But slowly, like a drop of black ink in a clear glass of water, things started to change. The sweetness turned cloying, then sour. She got tired of my old-fashioned ways, she said. My house, this home I've lived in for 40 years, became cluttered in her eyes. My advice became meddling. The front door clicked open, and I heard the familiar sound of Jeremiah's work boots and Monique's sharp, quick heels. "Mama, something smells good in here," Jeremiah called out, his voice still sounding like that little boy coming home from school, hoping baby for cookies. I wiped my hands on my apron, smiling. "In here, baby? Got your cake?" They came into the kitchen. Jeremiah, my big, handsome man with his daddy's kind eyes, came straight over and wrapped me in a hug. "You didn't have to do all this, Mama." "But I wanted to," I said, patting his back. Monique stood by the doorway, not even crossing the threshold. She was a beautiful girl, I'll give her that. Always dressed like she was headed to a board meeting, even on a Tuesday evening. Her hair was slicked back into a tight bun, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned my kitchen like she was tallying up the cost of every outdated appliance. She said, "Jeremiah, we don't have time for cake. We need to talk to your mother about the plans for Saturday." There it was, the thing they'd been hinting at for weeks. The senior living community. Shady Oaks, they called it. Sounded like a place where folks went to wait for the undertaker. I kept my voice even, pouring on them both a glass of sweet tea. "I told you, baby, I'm not moving. This is my home. Your daddy and I bought this house. He took his last breath in this living room. I'm not leaving." Jeremiah shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Mama, it's not about leaving. It's about ease. The house is too big for you. The stairs are getting steep. At Shady Oaks, they have people to help you, meals cooked for you." "I can cook my own meals, thank you very much, and I've been walking these stairs for 40 years. My legs ain't forgot how." Monique let out a short, sharp laugh that had no joy in it. "It's not just the stairs, May. It's the upkeep, the property taxes. Jeremiah worries about you constantly. It's a burden on him." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and heavy. Burden. I looked at my son. His eyes dropped to his plate. He couldn't even look at me. My own child, the boy I raised on my own after his daddy passed, letting his wife call me a burden in my own kitchen. "I am not a burden on my son," I said, my voice low and steady, though my hands were starting to tremble. "Of course you're not, Mama," Jeremiah mumbled, but it was weak. He was already siding with her. and we all knew it. Monique took a step closer, her perfume too strong for my small kitchen. It's not a discussion, Mae. We've put down the deposit. The movers are scheduled for Saturday. This is what's best for everyone. The audacity of this woman to come into my house, the house I built, and tell me what I was going to do. The warmth from the oven was gone, replaced by a cold fury settling in my bones. And what if I say no? I asked, looking right at her. She smiled then, a thin, cruel little line. Then you leave us no choice. We'll have to pursue other legal avenues. We're your only family. The courts tend to listen to the family's concerns about an elderly person's capacity to live alone. Elderly capacity. She was talking about having me declared incompetent. I saw the plan then, clear as day. They wanted me out. They wanted this house, probably saw the property values rising in this neighborhood and saw dollar signs where my home was. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Jeremiah. You let her do this to me, your own mama? He was crumbling, his shoulders hunched. Mama, please, just listen to reason. Monique cut him off. He's not letting me do anything. We're a team. We make decisions together, and we've decided this is what's happening. She picked up her purse from the counter. We're leaving. We'll be back Saturday morning with the movers. Be packed. She turned and walked out of my kitchen. Jeremiah stood there for a moment, a war raging on his face. Mama, he started. Just go on, Jeremiah, I whispered, my heart shattered into a million pieces at my feet. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain I couldn't fix for him, and then he turned and followed her out. The front door closed with a finality that echoed through the whole house. The silence they left behind was louder than any argument. I stood there in my kitchen, the lemon cake sitting there, uneaten. The hymn was gone from my lips. All I could hear was that word, burden. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of grief and anger. I didn't pack a thing. I just walked through rooms, touching the memories in the walls. The notch on the doorframe where we measured Jeremiah's height every birthday. The stain on the carpet when his daddy spilled his coffee trying to watch the news and hold the baby at the same time. This wasn't just the house, it was my life. Friday night came. The house was dark and quiet. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the dip in the seat that perfectly fit my body, just staring out the window at the moon. I heard a car pull up. It was Jeremiah's car, but only one person got out. Monique. My body went stiff. What was she doing here alone? The key turned in the lock. I'd given Jeremiah a key for emergencies, and now his wife was using it to invade my peace. She didn't turn on the lights. She just walked into the living room, her figure silhouetted by the street light from the window. I knew you wouldn't be packed, she said, her voice flat in the darkness. I'm not going, I said, my own voice sounding old and tired. She took a few steps closer. I could smell her perfume again. You are, and you will, because if you don't, you will make everything very difficult for Jeremiah, and I won't allow that. I stood up from my chair, facing her. You need to leave my house. This will be our house soon, she hissed, the politeness finally gone, stripped away to reveal the raw venom beneath. You are a stubborn, interfering old woman. You cling to Jeremiah like a pest, a nasty little pest that won't go away. I felt the words like a physical slap. A pest. an insect to be eradicated. I drew myself up to my full height. You get out of my house now. She leaned in, her face just inches from mine, her eyes glittering with a hatred I still don't understand. I wish you were dead, she whispered, each word precise and sharp as a razor blade. I lay in bed at night and wish you would just die. It would be so much easier for everyone, especially for Jeremiah. The air left my body. A mother-in-law and daughter-in-law might have they spats, but this was a curse. This was a wish for my very existence to be erased. I was too stunned to speak, too wounded to even cry. She looked at me, a final triumphant smirk on her face, then turned and walked out, leaving the front door wide open behind her. I stood there in the dark, in the silence of the home I was about to lose. The words pest and I wish you were dead echoing around me, poisoning the very air. I didn't know it then, child, but that was the night everything ended, and it was also the night something else began, something she never, ever saw coming. I stood there in the dark for a long time after that heifer left my front door hanging. The night air, it was cool, but it felt like it was burning my skin. A pest. I wish you were dead. Them words, they didn't just hang in the air. They crawled inside me, settling deep in my bones like a cancer. I felt hollowed out, like somebody had took a melon baller and scooped out everything that made me Mae, everything that was a mother, a grandmother, a woman who loved and was loved, and left nothing but an empty rind. I finally moved to shut the door, my body creaking like this old house. I locked it, turning the deadbolt with a final thunk that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Their sentence for me, Shady Oaks, a prison for the elderly, disguised with potted plants and bingo nights. The grief was a heavy, wet blanket smothering me. I stumbled back to my armchair and sank down into it. I wanted to cry. Lord, I wanted to wail and scream and cry until I had no voice left. But the tears wouldn't come. They was frozen somewhere, deep inside, trapped behind a wall of pure, cold shock. How could my own child let this happen? How could the boy I sung to sleep, the man I worked 2 jobs to put through college, just stand by while his wife told his mama she wished her dead? I must have sat there for an hour, just staring at nothing, my mind a swirl of broken pictures and Monique's hateful whisper. And then something shifted. It was a small thing, like the first tiny crack in a dam. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a question. You really gonna let her do this to you, Mae? It was my own voice in my head, but it sounded like my mama's. My mama who scrubbed floors so I could eat, who faced down landlords and bill collectors with a spine as solid steel. She didn't raise no victim. She raised a survivor. The hollowness inside me started to fill up, not with sadness, but with a slow simmering heat. I wish you were dead. Well, I wasn't dead. I was right here. And as long as I was drumming breath in this house that was mine, I had a say in what happened. I pushed myself up out of that chair. I wasn't tired no more. I was wide awake. I went to the kitchen and turned on the light, the bright fluorescence chasing the shadows out of the corners. My eyes fell on that lemon bundt cake, still sitting on the counter, untouched. It looked foolish now, a symbol of a love that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. I picked up the whole cake plate. I didn't hesitate. I walked it straight to the trash can and dumped it in. The china plate clattered against the metal bin. It was a small, violent sound, and it felt good. That was the first step, getting rid of the old sweetness to make room for the new truth. I needed a plan. They thought I was some confused old woman they could push into a home and forget about. They thought I was powerless, but they forgot one thing. I've been running this house, this life, for a long time. I know where all the papers are, and I know how to read. I went upstairs to the little room Jeremiah used to use as a boy. Now it was just a catch-all full of memories and boxes of things I couldn't bear to part with. In the back of the closet, under a stack of his old baseball trophies, was a fireproof lockbox. It wasn't big or fancy, but it held everything that mattered. I carried it down to the kitchen table, its weight solid and reassuring in my hands. I knew the combination by heart. My birthday. A small act of vanity maybe, but it served me right now. The lid popped open with a sigh. Inside was the life me and my Charles built together. The deed to this house clear and free. Our marriage certificate. Charles's life insurance policy, long since paid out and used to make sure Jeremiah wanted for nothing. And my will. A simple one, written back when Jeremiah graduated college. I left everything to him. My son, my only heir. I picked up that will, my fingers tracing the raised notary seal. I left it to him because that's what a mother does. You build a legacy for your children. You don't expect them to try and snatch it from you before you cold in the ground. Then my eyes fell on another paper, tucked underneath. It was thicker, with more legal jargon. It was the paperwork for the reverse mortgage I almost took out about 5 years back when the roof needed replacing and the bills were piling up. In the end, I managed without it, picking up extra shifts at the church and sewing dresses for folks on the side. I never signed the final papers, but I kept them, a reminder of a hard time I'd survived. I spread the documents out on the table, the deed, the will, the unsigned reverse mortgage papers. I looked from one to the other, the pieces starting to click together in my mind like tumblers in a lock. Monique thought she was so smart. She thought she had all the power, but she was playing checkers, and I was about to start a game of chess. A slow, grim smile touched my lips for the first time since she'd walked in here. It didn't reach my eyes. "You want me dead, child?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Well, you just lit a fire under a woman who knows how to burn." The next morning, I was up with the sun. I dressed in my Sunday best, a simple navy blue dress and my good hat with the little veil. I looked like I was headed to church. In a way, I was. I was going to seek counsel. I didn't go to my usual bank. I went across town to a small, unassuming credit union where my friend Beatrice's son, Marcus, worked as a manager. He was a good boy, raised right. When I asked to see him in private, he didn't ask no questions, just ushered me into his little office. "Auntie Mae," he said, smiling, "what can I do for you?" I got straight to it. I didn't tell him all my business, just the parts he needed to know. "Marcus, I need to know exactly what my rights are concerning my home. And I need to know what options a person has if they own their house free and clear." He listened, his smile fading into a look of professional concern. He pulled up my records. "The deed is solely in your name, Auntie Mae," he confirmed. "No liens, no mortgage, it's yours. And if someone was to try and make me move against my will, say for instance my next of kin," he leaned forward, his voice low and serious, "then, Auntie Mae, they can't. Not without a court order declaring you incompetent. And that's a long, difficult process. They'd have to prove you're a danger to yourself or others. Just preferring to live in your own home don't qualify. He looked me right in the eye. You are the sole owner. You have all the power here. You have all the power here. Them words was like a shot of the strongest whiskey. They warmed me from the inside out. I thanked Marcus, hugged his neck, and walked out of that credit union feeling 10 feet tall. They thought I was weak. They thought I was ignorant. They were in for a mighty surprise. My next stop was the hardware store. I walked down the aisles, my good purse hanging from the crook of my arm, until I found what I was looking for. I picked out the strongest, shiniest new deadbolt lock they led. Then I went to the copy center and made a single copy of one specific document from my lockbox. When I got home, I didn't waste no time. I got Charles's old toolbox from the garage, and I changed the front door lock myself. My hands, a little stiff with arthritis, remembered the work. It felt good, using a screwdriver, feeling the resistance of the metal. When I was done, I tested the new key. It turned smooth and solid. My house, my lock, my rules. I stood on my porch, holding that old key and the new one in my hand. I looked at Jeremiah's old key, the one he'd given to his wife so she could curse me in my own home. I walked over to the edge of the porch and I threw it, hard as I could, into the thick azalea bushes by the side of the house. Let it rust there. It was done. I went inside, the new key safe in my pocket. I taped a copy I'd made to the front door, right at eye level. It was a clean, clear photocopy of the deed to my house, showing my name and mine alone as the sole owner. Then I waited. I made myself a pot of coffee and I sat in my armchair facing the door. I wasn't scared no more. I was ready. Right on time, Saturday morning, I heard a car pull up, then another, a big van, the movers. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I heard footsteps on the porch, then a confused murmur. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't get up. I just called out, my voice clear and strong. "It's open." The door opened, and there they stood. Jeremiah, looking miserable and tense, and Monique, her face already set in a mask of smug victory. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for packed boxes, finding none. Her smile tightened. Then her eyes landed on the paper taped to the door. She leaned in, reading it. I watched her face change. The smugness melted away, replaced with confusion, then a dawning, furious understanding. Jeremiah saw it too. "Mama, what's this? What's going on?" Monique spun around to face me, her eyes slit. "What is this supposed to be, Mae? A joke?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, never breaking her gaze. "No, baby," I said, my voice sweet as that lemon cake I had thrown away. "That ain't no joke. That's the truth. And y'all can tell them movers to gone back where they came from. Ain't nothing leaving this house today." I set my cup down. "But since you're here, we need to have us a little talk, a new kind of talk." That new kind of talk started with a silence so thick you could taste it, like dust after an explosion. Monique stood there, her body so tight with rage I thought she might snap in two. Jeremiah just looked lost, his eyes darting from the deed on the door to my face, then to his wife's fury like a child watching his parents fight. "The nerve," Monique finally spat out, the words sizzling. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" "It changes everything," I said, my voice calm as a Sunday morning. This is my house, my name, my rules. And my first rule is you don't get to tell me what to do in it. Not you, I said, looking at her, then shifting my gaze to my son. And not you. Jeremiah flinched like I slapped him. Mama, we would just... I know what you would just. I cut him off, and the steel in my voice surprised even me. You were just letting your wife plan to ship your mama off to Shady Oaks. You were just standing in my kitchen while she called me a burden. You were just somewhere in the car, I presume, while she was here telling me she wished I was dead. His face crumbled, all the color draining out. Mo, you said that? He whispered, turning to her. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Her lips pulled back from her teeth. It's twisting the G. You know how she is, always the victim. I was frustrated. She was being impossible. Enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The word landed like a stone. Both of you, get out of my house. Mama, please, Jeremiah pleaded, taking a step forward. Let's just talk about this like a family. We stopped being a family the minute you let her call the shots on my life, I said, and I felt a crack in my heart widen as I said it. Now, I told you to go. The movers are waiting. You can explain to them why their trip was for nothing. Monique snatched the deed off the door, crumpling it in her fist. This isn't over, Mae. You can't just... I can, I said, standing up. I'm a tall woman, and I drew myself up to my full height looking down at her. Now get off my porch before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. The word trespassing hung in the air. Her eyes went wide with pure, undiluted hate. She grabbed Jeremiah's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Come on, Jeremiah, we're leaving. Let her rot in this dump. She yanked him, and he, my big grown son, let himself be led away like a scolded puppy. He looked back at me once from the doorway, his eyes hollow with the pain I couldn't fix, and then he was gone. I listened to the sound of the car door slamming, the engine starting, the mover's van pulling away. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't empty. It was charged like the air after a lightning strike. I had won the battle. I had kept my home. But the war was just beginning. I sat back down, my knees suddenly weak. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving me shaking. I had just threatened to call the police on my own child. The thought made me sick to my stomach. But what choice did they give me? They backed me into a corner, and a cornered animal will fight its way out. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The phone didn't ring. Nobody came by. It was like I had a disease and everybody knew to stay away. I knew what was happening. Monique was in his ear, poisoning him, turning him against me completely. She was probably telling him I was unstable, that I was a bitter old woman trying to ruin his marriage. And the worst part? A part of him was probably believing it. I couldn't just sit and wait for their next move. That reverse mortgage paperwork was still on my table, sitting there like a snake, both dangerous and tempting. I didn't want to borrow against my house, but I needed a different kind of weapon, a legal one. So I went to see another friend of a friend. This one was a lawyer, not a big fancy downtown lawyer, but a smart, no-nonsense black woman named Sister Cheryl Evans, who had an office over on Jefferson Avenue. She specialized in elder law. When I told her my story, sitting in a chair across from her tidy desk, she didn't look surprised. She looked tired, like she'd seen this story 100 times before. The first thing we do, Sister Mae, she said, her voice calm and sure, is we update that will immediately. I nodded. It was the one thing I knew I had to do. Given the circumstances, the attempt to force you into a facility, the verbal abuse, we can create a new will that explicitly disinherits them both, stating the reasons why. It creates a powerful legal record of their actions. Disinherit my own son? The words felt like ash in my mouth. Sister Cheryl gave me a look that was both kind and firm. He is not acting like a son. He is acting as an agent for a daughter-in-law who has expressed the wish for your death. We must protect you and your legacy. We can leave your estate to a church, a charity, a cousin, anyone you choose. I thought about it. I thought about Jeremiah's face as a boy, full of light and love. I thought about his face on my porch, full of shame and weakness. The hurt was a physical ache in my chest. Can we just leave it to my grandson? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Little CJ? He was only 2, the light of my life, the one pure thing to come out of that marriage. He called me G-Ma. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Sister Cheryl smiled softly. We can set up a trust for him, managed by an independent executor, and he comes of age. That way, the asset is protected from his parents. That felt right. It felt like a thread of hope, a way to salvage a piece of my legacy for the future, for the innocent one. Do it, I said, my voice finding its strength again. As I was leaving, Sister Cheryl handed me her card. One more thing, Sister Mae. Start keeping a journal. Write down every interaction, dates, times, what was said, if they call, if they show up, if they send a letter. Document everything. It's the simplest, most powerful thing you can do. I took her advice. I went to the drugstore and bought a simple lined notebook. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote down everything that had happened. I started with the day Monique called me a pest and told me she wished I was dead. I wrote down every detail, every word I could remember. I poured all the poison onto those pages. And when I was done, I felt a little lighter. A week passed, then another. The peace was unnerving. I knew it was the calm before the storm. I was watering my roses out front when it finally broke. A sleek gray sedan I didn't recognize pulled up. A man in a cheap suit got out carrying a thick envelope. He said, "Maureen Jefferson?" I said, "That's me," lowering my watering can. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." Then he got back in his car and drove away. My hands didn't even shake. I almost expected it. I tore open the envelope right there on my porch. It was a petition from the county circuit court. The title made my blood run cold. Petition for guardianship and conservatorship of an alleged incapacitated person. Filed by Jeremiah and Monique Jefferson. They were trying to have the court declare me incompetent, to take away my rights, to make me a ward of the state, or worse, of them. They listed reasons: failure to maintain property, social isolation, erratic and paranoid behavior. They cited my refusal to accept necessary help and my recent hostile and uncharacteristic actions, like changing the locks and making false accusations. I leaned against the porch column, the papers rustling in my hand. I looked out at my quiet street, at the home I'd loved and cared for my whole life. They weren't just trying to take my house, they were trying to take my mind, my freedom, my very personhood. I went inside, my heart beating a steady, angry rhythm. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I walked over to my kitchen table where my new notebook lay. I picked up my pen. I wrote down the date and time, served with guardianship papers by a process server. Then I picked up the phone and called Sister Cheryl. When she answered, my voice was clear and steady. "Cheryl, it's May. They just made their move." I took a deep breath. It's time to make ours. The phone felt cold and heavy in my hand after I told Sister Cheryl the news. Her voice on the other end was like an anchor in a hurricane. "All right, May, don't you panic. Breathe. This is what they do when they don't have a leg to stand on. They try to scare you into giving up. We are not gonna scare. She told me to bring the papers straight to her office. I didn't change out of my gardening clothes. Let the whole world see me in my old trousers and headscarf. Let them see the woman they were calling incapacitated. Sister Cheryl's office felt different this time, warmer, like a war room. She spread the petition out on her desk, her eyes skimming the lines, her mouth a firm line. She let out a short, dry laugh. Failure to maintain property. May, your house is in better shape than this building. Social isolation. That's what happens when your family abandons you. Erratic behavior. That's what they call it when a woman finally decides to stand up for herself. She looked up at me. This is weak. It's a bully's tactic. They hoping you'll be too old, too tired, too confused to fight it. They're hoping you'll just roll over. I ain't rolling nowhere, I said, my voice low. I know you're not, she smiled, a sharp, determined thing. First, we file a response, a forceful one. We deny every single allegation. Then we request a jury trial. A jury? The word sounded big, intimidating. Absolutely, she nodded. We want 12 regular people to see you, to hear you, to look at you, a coherent, strong woman, and then to look at them trying to lock their own mama away over a house. We want the world to see this. They're betting on you wanting to keep this quiet, to avoid the shame. We're going to call their bluff. The idea of airing all my family's dirty laundry in a public courtroom made my stomach clench. But Sister Cheryl was right. Shame was a luxury I couldn't afford no more. They were the ones who ought to be ashamed. The next few weeks was a whirlwind. I met with Sister Cheryl near every other day. We worked on my response. We went over my journal entries until I knew them by heart. She taught me how to sit, how to speak to the judge, what to expect. It was like getting ready for the performance of my life. And through it all, the silence from Jeremiah was deafening. Not a phone call, not a visit, nothing. It was like I had already ceased to exist for him. The hurt of that was a constant, dull ache, a toothache of the soul. Then one afternoon, I was coming back from the grocery store. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw a car parked across the street. It was Jeremiah's. My heart leapt into my throat, a foolish, hopeful thing. But he wasn't in it. The back door was open, and Monique was there, leaning in, unfastening my grandson, CJ, from his car seat. She saw me and froze for a second, her face twisting into that now familiar mask of contempt. She lifted CJ out, holding him on her hip. He saw me, and his little face lit up. "G-Ma!" he squealed in his arms, his little hands reaching out for me. It was like a knife to the heart. I took a step forward, my own hands yearning to hold him. Monique tightened her grip on him, turning her body so he couldn't see me. "No, baby," she said to him, her voice syrupy sweet, but her eyes on me were pure poison. "We can't see G-Ma right now. She's not well. She's sick." She said that word sick like it was a curse. CJ's little face crumpled, confused. I just want to say hello, I said, my voice breaking, just for a minute. "She doesn't need you confusing him," Monique snapped, her voice low and vicious. "He doesn't need your negativity. He doesn't need to be around someone who's trying to destroy his family." She turned and practically ran back to the driver's side, shoved CJ in his seat and slammed the door. She got in, peeled away from the curb without so much as a look back. I stood there in my driveway, my groceries getting heavy in my arms, and watched my grandson disappear. That was their real power, not the lawyers, not the papers. It was using that baby as a weapon against me. I felt the piece of my soul break off and crumble to dust right there on the concrete. I went inside, numb. I didn't even put the groceries away. I just sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. Using my boy against me? Telling him I was sick? It was the lowest, most cruel thing she could have done. The fire that had been burning in me since this all started flickered. What was the point of fighting for a house, for a legacy, if I lost my grandson in the process? The weight of it all felt like it was going to crush me. The doorbell rang. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to see nobody, but it rang again, insistent. I dragged myself up and went to the door. It was Beatrice, my old friend from church. She took one look at my face and her own fell. Lord May, what's happened now? She didn't wait for an invitation. She bustled right in, took one look at the groceries sitting on the floor, and got to work putting them away. Then she put the kettle on for tea. She didn't ask no questions. She just started talking, filling the silence with news from the choir, from the neighborhood, silly, normal things. And then she said, I saw Jeremiah's wife at the Stop and Shop the other day with that beautiful baby. She was telling Lois Peterson how worried they are about you, how you getting so forgetful, how the house is falling apart around you. Beatrice shook her head, her lips pressed tight. I set Lois straight. Don't you worry. I told her Mae Jefferson has a mind sharper than both of ours put together. But Mae, they talking, they spreading their lies all over town. Hearing that, knowing they were poisoning my name all over town, that was the match that relit my fire. The self-pity burned away, replaced by a cold, clean rage. They weren't just attacking me in court, they were attacking my reputation, the thing I'd spent a lifetime building. When Beatrice left, I felt stronger. I wasn't alone. I had friends, I had Sister Cheryl, and I had the truth. A few days later, Sister Cheryl called. She said, they blinking May. Their lawyer contacted me. They want to discuss a settlement before we go to trial. They want to sit down and talk. I said, a settlement? What kind of settlement? She said, they want to drop the guardianship petition. In exchange, you sign the house over to them immediately, and they grant you a life estate, the right to live here until you die. I was quiet for a minute, the sheer audacity of it washing over me. So they drop the lie that I'm incompetent, and in return, I give them exactly what they wanted in the first place? My house? That's about the size of it, she said, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. They're scared of a jury. They know their case is built on sand. I said, tell them no, without a second of hesitation. Tell them we'll see them in court. Sister Cheryl was quiet for a beat. You sure, May? A life estate would guarantee you a place to live. I'm sure, I said, my voice firm as stone. This was never about a place to live. This is about my dignity, and that ain't for sale. They started this war by telling the world I'm crazy. I'm gonna finish it by proving I'm the sanest one in the room. There was a new silence on the other end of the line, a silence of respect. All right then, Sister May, she said softly. Then we go to war. The word war sounded different coming from Sister Cheryl's mouth. It wasn't a hot word, all fire and fury. It was a cold word, precise, like a surgeon's scalpel. And that's what the weeks before the trial felt like. We was in the operating room, and she was carefully, methodically taking apart their case piece by piece. We didn't just deny their claims. We built a fortress around my life. Sister Cheryl had me gather up decades of my own records, bank statements showing I pay my bills on time every time, receipts from the landscaper and the handyman I hired regular, my tax returns. She even had me take pictures of every room in my house, the clean kitchen, the well-ordered living room, the pantry stocked neat as a pin. Evidence. We was turning my whole life into evidence. The hardest part was the independent doctor.
The court sent a man to evaluate me to see if I was of sound mind. He was a young, tired-looking fella who came to my house and asked me 100 questions. Who's the president? What year is it? Count backwards from 100 by sevens. I looked him right in the eye and said, "Son, I've been balancing my checkbook and running this household since you was a gleam in your daddy's eye. You can ask me about the price of eggs in 1985, and I'll tell you it was 99 cents a dozen." He almost smiled. Almost. But he wrote it all down. The day we got his report, Sister Cheryl called me, her voice practically singing. "May," she said, "the doctor's evaluation is in. He states you have no cognitive deficits, excellent recall for personal and historical details, and a clear understanding of your financial and personal circumstances." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. It was one thing for me to say I was sane. It was another thing for a court-appointed stranger to confirm it. The day before the trial, there was a knock at my door. It was evening. I wasn't expecting nobody. I looked through the peephole, and my heart just about stopped. It was Jeremiah, alone. My first instinct was to not open it, to let him stunt out there in the cool night air. But the mama in me, that part that never dies, won out. I opened the door. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed. His clothes were wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in them. He looked older than his years. "Mama," he said, his voice rough. "Jeremiah?" He didn't try to come in. He just stood on the porch, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Can we talk, please?" I stepped aside and let him pass. He walked into the living room and stood there looking lost, like he didn't know this place no more. "This has to stop, Mama," he said, not looking at me. "We can stop this right now, before tomorrow." "How?" I asked, my arms crossed over my chest. "Just sign the papers," he pleaded, finally turning to face me. There was a desperation in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. "Sign the life estate. Keep the house. We'll drop everything. It's a good deal." "A good deal," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "A good deal for who? For you. You get my house without the mess of having me in it? You think I don't know that the minute I sign that paper, you and Monique will be counting the days?" "That's not true," he said, but it was weak, the lie tasting bad in his own mouth. "Look at me, son," I commanded. He dragged his eyes up to mine. "You stood in this very room and let her call me a burden. You got in that car after she told me she wished I was dead. And now you're in my house on the eve of you trying to have a judge tell the world I'm a crazy old woman, and you're asking me to take a deal?" His face crumpled. She gets in my head, Mama. You don't know what it's like. It's easier to just go along." "That's the problem, Jeremiah," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "Your whole life, you took the easy way. When school got hard, you wanted to quit that football team. When work got hard, you wanted to move back home. And now, when your marriage got hard, the easiest thing was to throw your mama away. Well, life ain't easy. Being a man ain't easy. And being a son sure ain't easy when your wife is the devil's own handmaiden." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." "Sorry don't mean a thing if you're still standing on the other side of the courtroom for me tomorrow," I said, my own tears threatening to fall, but I held them back. I had to be stone. "You want this to stop? You walk into that courtroom tomorrow and you tell your lawyer to drop it. You stand up and you tell the judge you made a terrible mistake. You do that and we can talk. You do anything less and there ain't nothing left to say."
He looked at me, his shoulders shaking with sobs he was trying to hold in. He looked like that little boy again, the one who used to climb into my lap when he had a bad dream. But he wasn't that boy no more. He was a man making his choices. He didn't say another word. He just turned, opened the door, and walked out into the night. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I had offered him a way out, a way back, and he had walked away from it. The finality of it was a physical pain. The next morning, I put on my navy blue suit, the one I wore to Charles's funeral. It felt right. Sister Cheryl met me on the courthouse steps. She looked me up and down and gave a sharp, approving nod. "You look like truth, Mae. You look like justice." The courtroom was cold and echoey. The wood was dark and shiny, and the air smelled like old paper and fear. I sat at a big table with Sister Cheryl. At the other table was Jeremiah, Monique, and a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, their lawyer. Jeremiah wouldn't look at me. Monique stared a hole right through me, her hate like a heat coming off her. The judge came in, a serious-faced black woman with glasses on a chain. We all stood. My knees felt weak, but I locked them. Their lawyer went first. He talked about their concern. He called me elderly and vulnerable. He talked about the deteriorating condition of my home, the unpaid bills they feared were piling up. He made it sound like I was one step away from living in a hoarder's nest eating cat food. Then it was Sister Cheryl's turn. She stood up, calm as you please. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and carrying, "this isn't a case about a vulnerable elder. This is a case about a greedy daughter-in-law and a weak-willed son who want to steal a hard-working woman's home out from under her." She walked the judge through our evidence. She showed her the pictures of my spotless house. She entered the bank statements into the record, and then she picked up the doctor's report. The court's own expert found Mrs. Jefferson to be of perfectly sound mind, more sound, I would wager, than the petitioners who brought this frivolous, malicious case. I saw the judge's eyes flick over to Jeremiah and Monique. Her expression was unreadable.
Then Sister Cheryl did something I didn't expect. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter one more piece of evidence into the record." She held up my simple lined notebook. "This is my client's journal. She began keeping it on the advice of counsel to document the harassment and abuse she has endured from the petitioners." Monique's lawyer shot up. "Objection. Hearsay. This is a self-serving document." The judge looked over her glasses at Sister Cheryl. "Where are you going with this, counselor?" "Your Honor," Sister Cheryl said, opening the book to a marked page, "I intend to show a pattern of behavior. I will read just one entry. Dated the night the petitioner, Monique Jefferson, came to my client's home alone." She cleared her throat and read my words, my own voice filling that cold room. She leaned in, her face just inches from mine, her eyes glittering with a hatred I still don't understand. "I wish you were dead," she whispered, each word precise and sharp as a razor blade. "I lay in bed at night and wish you would just die. It would be so much easier for everyone, especially for Jeremiah." The courtroom was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked over at their table. Jeremiah had his head in his hands. Monique was white as a ghost, her lawyer looking stunned. Sister Cheryl closed the book with a soft thud. "That, Your Honor, is not the language of concern. That is the language of a predator. We ask that this petition be denied in its entirety with prejudice." She sat down.
The judge was quiet for a long moment, looking at the papers in front of her. Then she took off her glasses. She looked at our lawyer and said, "Mr. Jacobs, do you have any response to this? Any evidence beyond conjecture that Mrs. Jefferson is a danger to herself or others? Any proof of these unpaid bills, of this profound deterioration?" The lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, the emotional state of the parties, the strain on the family." "The strain on the family appears to have been caused solely by your clients," the judge said, her voice like ice. "I have read the doctor's report. I have seen the evidence of Mrs. Jefferson's competence, and I have now heard a direct, contemporaneous account of a wish for her death from one of the petitioners." She looked from Jeremiah to Monique, her gaze lingering on their shame. "This petition is an abuse of this court's process. It is denied with prejudice." She brought her gavel down. Crack! It was over, just like that. I felt dizzy. Sister Cheryl put a steadying hand on my arm. We had won. We had actually won. I looked across the room. Monique was gathering her purse, her face a thundercloud of fury. She shot me one last venomous look and stormed out. Jeremiah stood there for a moment, his eyes meeting mine. There was no victory in his face, no relief, just a deep, bottomless shame. Then he turned and followed his wife out of the courtroom. The war was over. I had my house, I had my freedom, I had my name. But as I watched my son walk away, I knew I had lost something too, something that no court in the world could ever give me back. The gavel sound still echoed in the room, but the silence it left behind in my heart was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Winning in that courtroom was like taking a deep, clean breath after being trapped underwater for months. The air should have tasted sweeter. The world should have looked brighter. But when I walked out of that courthouse, the sun was just as it was, the city just as noisy, and my heart was just as heavy. Victory, it turned out, was a hollow kind of sound. Sister Cheryl squeezed my arm. "You did it, Mae. You stood your ground and you won. They can't ever try this again." "I know," I said, and my voice sounded far away. "Thank you, Cheryl, for everything." She looked at me, really looked at me, seeing past the victory to the weariness underneath. "It's going to take time, Mae, to process all this. Be easy on yourself." I saw a little of the fear in her eyes melt away, replaced by a glimmer of something else. Hope. Strength. I walked her through what to say. I told her to tell her son, I am not signing no papers until my own lawyer, Sister Cheryl Evans, looks them over. I gave her Cheryl's number. When she left, she stood a little taller. She hugged me, a quick, fierce thing. "Thank you, Sister Mae. You made me feel like I could breathe again." After she was gone, I stood on my porch watching her car disappear. That hollow feeling inside me, it wasn't so hollow no more. It was filling up with a new purpose. Beatrice was right. My fight wasn't just for me. Word got around. Another woman called, then another. Sometimes they just came and sat in my kitchen and cried. Sometimes they needed practical advice. I wasn't no lawyer. I couldn't give them that. But I could give them the one thing they needed most, the permission to fight back, the assurance that they weren't crazy, they weren't a burden, they were being bullied. I started keeping a new notebook, not for my own battles, but with the names and numbers of these women. A network. A sisterhood of survival. It was on a Tuesday, just like this all started when the call came. It was Jeremiah.
His voice on the phone was flat, defeated. Mama? Jeremiah. My own heart was hammering against my ribs. It's Monique, he said, and there was no emotion left in him. She's gone. Gone where? Gone. She left. She took CJ and she left. She said she didn't sign up for a lifetime of struggle. She said I was a loser who couldn't even get a house from his own mother. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She cleaned out our bank account. She's gone. I was silent, taking it in. The architect of all this misery, gone. The vengeance I thought I wanted, it tasted like dust. She took my baby, he whispered, and the pain in his voice was raw, a fresh wound. She took my son, Mama. And in that moment, he wasn't the man who betrayed me. He was my little boy, crying because he'd lost something precious. The anger I'd been nursing for months, it just evaporated. It left behind a deep, aching sadness for him, for me, for CJ, for all the ruin that woman had left in her wake. I'm so sorry, Jeremiah, I said, and I meant it. He was crying openly now. I was wrong, Mama. I was so wrong about everything. I lost it all. I lost you. I lost my son. I have nothing. I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. The war was over. The enemy had fled. And my son, my foolish, weak, heartbroken son, was standing in the rubble, finally seeing the destruction. You listen to me, Jeremiah Jefferson, I said, my voice strong and clear, carrying all the love and pain a mama can hold. You come home. You hear me? You come home right now. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, filled only with his ragged breaths. Okay, Mama. I'm coming home.
Life sure got a funny way of circling back, don't it? If this story touched your heart or made you think twice about folks' intentions, don't forget to like this video and share it with somebody who needs a little wisdom from Auntie Mae. And baby, go on and subscribe to Whispers of Auntie Mae, 'cause next time I got a story even the devil himself wouldn't believe. See y'all soon, sugar.